You'll be getting fed up with me by the end of this conference, which is very soon. So, as I said yesterday, this mini keynote was in 2 parts. And just to refresh your memory, the title is called the Reality Distortion Field of Testing, and it comes from back in 1986 when Bud Tribble of Apple coined that phrase for Steve Jobs, which, when Steve was using his charisma, his charm, his authority to really coerce people into doing things that they felt they couldn't do and that was impossible. And sometimes it worked and sometimes it didn't. And we said that we're living in that in our organizations, the reality distortion field of testing. And I mentioned things like test plans, estimation, looking at things like documentation and scripts. And we finished off on meetings. And I've got 2 more to tell you about the reality distortion field, and then I'm going to give you my solutions. But before I do, can I just have a show of hands? How many people here actually use virtual meetings, as in a sort of a voice thing or going, wow, okay. Now, I'm going to talk about 2 more reality distortion fields, and then I'm going to move directly into the solutions which you all want to hear about, and my solution I'm going to present to you. Automation. We've heard a lot this week about automation and automating our tests, and I'm a big fan of automation, I really am. I grew up many, many years ago with one of the first automation tools that was not very clever, it wasn't very robust, and yet we tried to persevere with it. I think automation can be very good. It increases productivity. It makes us more efficient with our testing, potentially. It can find bugs quicker. Some of the automation tools, such as static analysis tools, some of the tools like coverage tools, that can help us establish what type of testing we do. And it also, dare I say it, provides testers with new skill sets, which is always a good thing. But here's the bad about it. I think we can waste an enormous amount of time on automation. I think automation can suck our energy out of what we're meant to be doing. And sometimes, if we sit down and think about it, what has taken us maybe 3-4 hours doing automation, it could take us about 10 minutes doing it manually. And yet we don't look at those things. The other thing I'm a bit concerned about is that execution tools are fantastic to give us confidence, running regression tests. But there is no tool on the market that can actually take away or replace this sort of testing. I wonder what happens if I press this. There is no tool on the market that can do that. There is no tool on the market that can replace you as manual testers. And don't let any of the vendors tell you otherwise. The other thing is, if you do too much automation, then basically you can lose your testing skills. And if you don't believe me on that, Google a white paper that was written by a guy called James Whittaker many years ago. He now works for Microsoft. He used to work for Google, and he was employed by Microsoft because he kept standing up at presentations in the States saying, "Why does Windows Vista suck?" And basically, he gave a presentation as to why Windows Vista was so bad. And I went to a Mac because of Vista. And Vista was appalling. And so Microsoft employed him and said, "Tell us why Windows Vista was so bad in your opinion." And it rocked the management team, because his conclusion was that they did too much automation and not enough manual exploratory testing. And Microsoft turned around and said, "James, would you like a job?" And he's there to this day, actually heading up exploratory testing teams. And I think sometimes there's too much emphasis on test execution rather than automation in general. And I think some organizations, I don't know if one of your organizations is the same, but some organization comes up ridiculous claims or quotes. I met one the other week, and it said this. The CEO of the organization said to the test group, "Next year, in 2018, I want 75% of all your tests automated." Absolute ridiculous statement to make, because what I said to the testers, cut your tests down to 100 tests, automate 75% of them, 75 of them, you've met your objective. In fact, why don't you automate all of them and you've automated 100%? Absolute ridiculous statements. So let's say, again, we spend about 3 days out of 15 on some form of automation. That's about 20%. Also, have we heard this? I'm just getting very, very tired within certain communities where they say testers must become developers. Testers need new skill sets. Testers must be a jack of all trades. And I'm getting very tired of this, and particularly in the Agile community where it says, okay, testers need to help the developers. And in best case scenario, then I agree we need to help with the unit tests, help early on in the testing. I absolutely agree with that. But I do not believe for one instance that testers should become developers. If you do want to do that, absolutely fine. But I'll tell you what will happen in your organizations. Your product owners, your business will turn around and say, we used to have 5 developers and 5 testers. We've now got 10 developers. We can do double the amount of development work. And then testing won't happen. And I just get really tired of this type of thing. Now, this is a quote. We need testers who are multi-skilled testers that can put their hands to anything that if required. And that might mean developing using Java or C++. Now, jack of all trades. Who knows what this is? Swiss Army knife. Who has ever owned a Swiss Army knife? Okay, let me tell you about Swiss Army knives. Have you ever tried to use the scissors? Useless. A saw, that's not going to saw a piece of wood. And then we've got this thing here, which is to take stones out of horses' hooves. I've never taken a stone out of a horse's hoof. The screwdriver here, not screwdriver, these screwdrivers here are absolutely useless. The one thing that may be useful is a knife, maybe. This is a jack of all trades. And I'll tell you now, if you start diversifying your skill sets and you become a developer, you become a designer, you become this, you'll be useful for nothing. And I say to you, we need to focus on what's important, and that's becoming a good, experienced, expert tester. I fought for 6 years in my organization for testers to be given the same remuneration as developers. It took me 6 years. When I first joined, the testers were paid the lowest of the low salaries, and testers were paid up here. And I changed that over 6 years. And I thought that that was a fight worth fighting. And we've got to actually produce experienced, expert testers. The testers that go up to a machine or a piece of software and it just crashes. That's brilliant. And I go to the tester, how did you do that? That's amazing. So let's say we spend around 2 days out of 15 helping developers. So this is the super unfit tester of today. We are trying to do so much in our organizations. Test plans, test specifications, be a developer, actually go out and generate automation scripts. And what happens is that we have, if we look at this, and remember what my first slide said, we need to be super fit and lean, and our aim is to find defects and gain confidence. Notice what's happened here. Only 6%, if we're lucky, is dedicated to test execution. The rest is all the other stuff. Now let me tell you about this superhero. This tester can't run tests. In fact, this tester can't even run because he's so fat. So, the reality distortion field of testing. Managers believe, and I think this is wrong, managers believe we are doing an excellent job if we do loads and loads of jobs that are not really up to us. So I'm going to present you with an alternative. I'm going to present you with a super tester of tomorrow. A lean, fit superhero. And this is my solution. Now, please take it or leave it. It's entirely up to you. But I'm going to say we should dedicate 50% of our time, non-negotiable, to actually executing and running manual exploratory testing. The other 50% of our time can be all the other stuff, okay? And this way, we can get experience in our testing skills. 50% of our time, and I think this is non-negotiable for me. So how are we going to do it? So let's go back to those aspects that I talked about of estimation and planning, and let me give you a potential solution. Estimation. Let's dedicate 2 hours out of 15 days maximum to estimating testing. Now, the reason for this is I believe there are two main problems in our organizations with test estimation. We do not estimate testing correctly. There is a big myth about test estimation. The myth is this. Now, a myth is a fabrication of truth or a half-truth. Now, the fact is, with any estimation, it involves two aspects. It involves effort and it involves resource. And when we put those two together, it will give us our schedule. Now, with estimation, that's a myth. It's a half-truth because we need to estimate quality. There is a direct relation, a direct correlation between the quality we're expecting out of development and the effort we're going to expend in terms of testing. Direct correlation. And yet no one does this. The other is managers do not get this. Now I'm going to show you by illustration what I mean. Let's imagine your manager says to you, roughly how long is it going to take you to test this application? And you do your homework and you spend time and you work out that it's going to take you and your team 4 weeks, okay? 4 weeks of testing. That includes all aspects of testing. Now, he says to you, because it's late in the day on Friday, he says to you, let me think about that 4 weeks. Now, as he's getting in his car, he's thinking 4 weeks. Already, he's putting it into his schedule, and it doesn't fit. Now, this is what I'd like you to do. You see, we've done our homework, and I think there's a relation between the effort we're thinking we're doing and the service we're going to provide. But you see, for that 4 weeks, they're going to get the platinum service. Now, let's add into that not only the effort, but let's add in the estimate for our number of defects. So let's say we're going to estimate 80 defects. Already he's got in his car and he said 4 weeks doesn't fit. Now, what are you doing in 4 weeks? This is not difficult. Testing, great. Now, 4 weeks doesn't fit, but 2 weeks does. What are you doing in those 2 weeks? Testing. It's identical to the 4 weeks according to our manager. And what we need to do now is we need to say, well, okay, if we've got two weeks, you're not going to get the platinum service. You're going to get the silver service. Now, he goes home and he has a barbecue at the weekend, and on Sunday evening, he has a dream about the project. And it's the perfect project. Everything went well. In fact, he gave you 2 weeks, but you didn't need it. You only needed 1 week. Now, what are you doing in 1 week? Testing. I know less testing, but to the manager, it's exactly the same. So now we've got 1 week, because he comes into work on Monday and says, I've got a brilliant idea. Thank you for your estimate. Instead of 4 weeks, you've got 1 week. This doesn't happen, does it? And you see, what we need to do is go back to the manager and say, well, okay, we'll use 1 week. I've given up arguing with managers, absolutely arguing with them. If you give me 1 week, then you've got the bronze service. And they'll go, what's in the bronze service? And you go, not a lot. Now, have you looked at the defects? You see, with the platinum service, we were going to find 80 defects. Now, in less time, we're going to find less defects, but more defects will be found by our customer base. And this is a dilemma in testing. I'm going to put myself as devil's advocate. What would a senior manager prefer? Giving you 4 weeks and you find loads more defects that will slow the project down, or give you 1 week where you find less defects and we can sign off early? I'm just playing devil's advocate. So quick estimates. Just assume we can run 4 exploratory testing charters a day. That's 2 hours per charter. Assume we're going to find 10 defects per charter. Very, very quick. That's 2 hours out of 15 that we dedicate to test estimation. It's not worthwhile arguing with managers. Test plans. Dedicate 2 hours out of 15 maximum for test planning. So instead of this, which no one reads, and I was talking to, I don't know if Henry's here, I was talking to Henry and he gave me a story on his last project. He sent out a test plan and said to his management team, was it okay? And they said, absolutely perfect, fantastic. He'd inadvertently sent a blank test plan. So not only was there rubbish written in it, there was nothing in it. So regardless of this, rather than ending up with a pile of 50-page test plan, let's produce half a page of bullet points and let's present that to the team. And I will guarantee that this is still a plan and it might even be read, but it will be commented on in the presentation. Just 2 hours maximum. So there's our 50% still dedicated to test execution. Test specifications. Let's dedicate 3.5 hours out of 15 days, and you can scale this up to your projects. So that's a maximum, 3.5% dedicated. Test charters, high level, yes. Test cases, maybe. Depends on your project if you want to go down, but keep them at a high level. We've already said this, Dawn was saying this morning, test procedures and scripts, no, okay? Don't produce them unless someone else is going to run them, or you need auditability or automation. And I'd add a fact that really the only one that I would consider as being truthful or yes, we should do it, is automation. The other two, there's tools to enable us to do it. So there you go. We've still got our 50% of execution. Environments. Environments are a difficult one because we all need test environments to run. So the last set of slides, I said that we spent about 3.5% of our time on environments. Now keep that percentage. Don't reduce it by any means. And monitor the availability of your environment. And if you're going over that period of time, then it might be your environment needs to be uphauled and sort of enhanced to make more realistic and more representative and more robust in future. So there you go, we've got our environment there of 3.5%. Test reporting. We've heard some tremendous presentations about how we provide information. So I'm going to suggest this, that rather than detailed reports, we dedicate 3.5 hours out of 15 days, that's half a day, to test reporting over that 15-day period. So when we're doing exploratory testing, we have high-level tests in the form of charters. And what we can do is we do a 15-minute debrief at the end of each day. And during that 15 minutes, we provide proof. That is a good acronym for our testing. Very, very quick. Product assessment. Very quick product assessment of what we've done that day. Looking at the results, how many bugs did we find? What was the issues that we experienced? What were the observations? What were the things we need more investigation on? What are the obstacles that are preventing us doing our job? And also, what are our future plans for the following day? And this fits really nicely with stand-up meetings. And move away, please move away from this number of test cases that managers are wanting. And I told you yesterday, all they want are large numbers. The larger the better according to our managers. So we need to move away. And if they keep on asking for this irrelevant information, then challenge it. It's just a reality distortion field. So there you go, there's still our 50% dedicated, and it's chopping up the other 50%. Meetings. Meetings have to happen whether we like it or not. Okay, so I suggest out of 15 days, we should spend about an hour per day. That is about 15 hours. That's about 2 days out of 15 on meetings. Now, when you're doing test execution, and this is difficult, when you're doing test execution, no phone calls, no emails, switch your links off or your Skypes off, and dedicate those 2 hours to test execution. Because every time you're interrupted, you lose downtime, you lose productivity. And the more we do this, the people will get it. They will understand. They will know you are busy, okay? And you just say, it's just for 2 hours, it's just for an hour and a half, and after that, I'll be with you. But please leave me alone. You see, everyone believes that they can interrupt you. And I think sometimes we need to take hold of our own destination and our own, basically our own hours that we've got in the day. Bring in meeting etiquette. I see so many meetings that if they brought in some etiquette into meetings, it would be much more efficient. For instance, have an agenda. Start on time. No phones out or texting. No laptops doing emails. And then we dedicate ourselves to the meeting in hand. And I reckon an hour's meeting can actually be shortened to about 20 minutes, 15 minutes, if we have meeting etiquette. Automation. Dedicate 2 days out of 15 to automation. That's 14%. Tools are there to support testing. There is no tool on the market that can fully automate testing. We need human beings to do that job. And there is much more to test automation than just execution tools. There are test design tools that can really help generate your tests automatically. Things like TestOnner and Picked, things like SmartDraw, things like Decision Table Creator that are free. There are things that help with bug raising, like Instabug on mobile phones. And make automation work for you. I usually say, if you are bored in your job as a tester, there is usually a tool that can actually replace that boredom. So if you're running scripts manually over and over again, execution tool. If you're having to generate tests manually, there's a test design tool. If you're doing compares manually with one file or another, there's a compare tool. So if ever you are bored in testing, there is a tool that probably help you on that. And finally, assisting developers. I'm not saying we shouldn't assist developers by any means at all. I think we need to collaborate with them. But look what's happened here. We said this is sacrosanct. 50% of my time in my company, I'm dedicated test execution. I'm going to chop up all the other bits. And the developers, you can have what's left, which apparently is about 7.5% of that 100%. That's about a day in 15 days. This is the yin-yang approach. You see, if we help developers, I expect developers to help us. And you know, if that happens, and if we do help developers and developers help us, then we can dedicate more time to helping developers. Absolutely, those numbers go up. But resist, please resist becoming a developer, unless you want to become a developer. And you can become a developer by doing automation. But don't get into Java and C++, because what will happen is you will be dragged into developing software rather than testing it. And we had some shocking things from Les yesterday about some quotes about statistics and what's happened when people don't test. So there you have it. 50% manual exploratory testing, dedicated. Try it, okay? Just try it out. It may not work for you, but it might work for you. So there's our super fit lean tester of tomorrow. 50% manual testing to find bugs, gaining confidence, saving money, happier customers and happier testers. This is the fun stuff. Running tests and finding defects. I was talking to Henry yesterday, and he told me a story about, he's just bought a car with lots of sensors. And this car automatically stops when it detects something. And he also has hooked up, because he likes a boat. He's hooked up a boat to drive to his destination because he likes sailing. And he went to reverse, and it wouldn't reverse because it detected an object behind the car. Now, I'm convinced that that company had huge amount of documentation, massive amount of documentation for testing. But I wonder if anyone said, I wonder what happens if somebody hooks up something and then tries to reverse. Obviously, they didn't. So, what to do now? Think about this reality distortion field. I've produced a number of these fridge magnets. It will be first come, first serve. Not now, at the end. I've given it to the staff outside, and they're under strict authorization not to give these out until people leave. So don't leave now, because we've got Paul coming up to do his keynote. And this fridge magnet just says, become the super tester of tomorrow and break the reality distortion field of testing today. And there's a superhero on it. Now, if you don't like it, you can actually prise it open and put a picture of your family in if you want. So, but I'm going to tell you one story just to finish in 2 minutes. Because you're going to go away from this conference. There's loads of things that have been pounding in your heads about what to change, what you want to do. I've told you about 50% dedicated to it and do this and that. And there's loads of ideas. And you have to choose what is best for you. You have to choose your battles when it comes to going back to your office. You can't win every battle, and you have to take little steps. Now, how many of you are parents? Parents? Okay, majority of the audience. I never give advice to parents. I think parents need to learn the hard way sometimes, but there is one piece of advice somebody gave me. And they said, Lloyd, you need to choose your battles with your kids. You can't win every battle. So my daughter came home when she was 13, Hannah her name, and she said, Dad, I want my ears pierced. I said, no, absolutely not. But Dad, everyone's getting their ears pierced. No, you're 13 years old. But Dad, no. We had this argument. She started crying. My wife came in. What's happened here then? Dad won't let me get my ears pierced. My wife looked at me and said, what's the problem? Ears pierced. If it hurts, then it soon heals up, you know, and if she doesn't like them, she can take them out. Just chill. That was her words to me. Just chill. She can have her ears pierced. So we're like, oh, don't listen to me. So my daughter at 13 years old went out and got her ears pierced. She was 14. She came home. My wife was out again. Dad, I want my belly button pierced. Now, guys, remember a year ago, ears pierced, no. From your wife. So, belly button pierced, same. So I said to my daughter, yeah, absolutely. My wife came home. My daughter was, yeah. My wife said, what's up? Dad's let me get my belly button pierced. My wife, what have you done that for? You know, belly button, and I can't win. At 15, she came home. Dad, I want a tattoo. Absolutely no. And in the UK, you can't get a tattoo without your parents' permission until you're 18. She complained and we said no. My wife backed me up, said no, you're too young. On her 18th birthday, she went out. She took her birth certificate, she went to her tattoo parlor, and she came home and said, Dad. My daughter's 30 years old now. I said to her, do you like your tattoo? She said no. Take me a lot to say I told you so, but she's learnt a lesson. Listen, I'm going to hand over to Szilard now to introduce Paul. I hope you've had a really, really good conference. This is going to be a fantastic keynote to end the conference. And please keep in touch. And Szilard, over to you.
You know, Lloyd, you still need to do a little work. We have questions.
Okay. Okay. How do you measure and report test progress without test cases? Okay. Do something different. You see, test cases are fine if we know what a test case is. But why don't we report on test charters? I do that. I've run 6 test charters today, and this is what I've found. Why don't we report on coverage? You know, we've done 50% of the pairwise coverage. And I think what we need to do is we've got into a rut because everyone expects us to report on test cases, but nobody actually knows what a test case is. Not even ISTQB, which has lots of definitions. They can't actually agree as to what a test case is. And so because of that, there is so much confusion in the industry. If your organization knows what a test case is, and the test case is quality test cases, then absolutely report on them. But why don't you report on test ideas or test conditions that are very high level? So that's a suggestion for you. Okay, what about production issues that can also be interrupted, the QA test running, 50%? Yeah, I'm not saying by any means that if you've got a major disaster out in production, you say, nope, I'm doing my exploratory testing and Lloyd has said I'm not to be interrupted. Obviously, if you've got serious Sev1 issues that have come through to production, then you need to actually drop everything and help that out, and hopefully you can get back on track. So definitely, I'm not saying don't look at production issues because they're the ones your customer. But I will say this, if there are production issues, why don't you do a live feedback loop? Why don't you say, okay, customers have hit this problem. Why didn't we pick that up? What do we need to do different in order to safeguard our customers the next time round? Another one. Okay, some testers at our company in integration testing think it doesn't need to know how to write code or read it at least. What is your opinion? So some testers in our organization in integration testing thinks he doesn't need to know how to write code. Well, I don't think testers need to know how to write code. I think testers need to know how to test and need to know how to be curious, need to know those questions. Now, obviously, I'm an ex-developer. I know how to write code, and I've come from that background. But I had people in my team that hadn't touched a piece of code. They were fantastic testers. And I don't think we need to write code. I think it can help in as much as we understand how code is written and we can test from a technical perspective, but I don't think it's needed. But I think if that person's got an attitude, that is something else to deal with. You know, and I don't think it's necessary to say every tester doesn't have to write code. I think knowing about it can really help us explore testing and be better testers, you know, ultimately. And how do you get all the info in one-page test plan? It'll say we're going to test, but the additional information like test environments. Let me say about things like test environments and things like resources. Let me tell you, your business doesn't care about your test environments. They don't. Your project managers don't care about your test environments. Your project managers care about the schedule. Your business care about risks and about how you're going to deliver. So we need to understand who is the test plan going to? What is the purpose of a test plan? And I think, you know, having environments, that could be put into a higher level document like a test strategy, and we refer to it and don't clutter up our test plan. I think we've got to come down to a sensible, manageable test plan that people are going to read. Now, Lisa Crispin in the Agile community has actually put together a one-page Agile test plan, which is absolutely fantastic. And I think we need to go in that route and have bullet points and maybe mention a test environment. But let's face it, only us in testing is probably worried about the test environment, and maybe the people that are actually using it or those that are supporting it need to know as well. So hopefully that's helpful. Thank you for those questions, by the way.